Welcome to the second of 3 PowerPoints in this week's Management of Information Security. Here we're focusing on Chapter 4. The learning objectives include the definition of information security policy, the 3 major types of information security policy, explaining what is needed to implement effective policy, and discussing the process of developing, implementing, and maintaining various types of information security policies. Why do we need a policy for information security? An information security policy is typically a document that outlines specific requirements or rules that must be met. In information security realm, policies are usually point-specific, covering a single area. However, policies are the least expensive means of control and often the most difficult, however, to implement. So still you may ask, why policy? Well, according to Bergeron and Berube, you'll find that all policies must contribute to the success of the organization. Management must be involved as well as the end users. And in the end, a policy, therefore, creates the organization's success and secures their information. Policies are important. They're reference documents for internal audits, and the resolution for legal disputes about management's due diligence, and policy documents can also act as a clear statement of management's intent. Note the bullseye model layers. Policy is your first layer of defense. It is also shown here in this graphical depiction of the bullseye model. In the previous presentation, we discussed the policy is typically a document that outlines specific requirements. Standards are a collection of system-specific or procedural-specific requirements, and guidelines are best practices, yet still system-specific. For policies to be effective, they must be properly disseminated, read, understood by the reader, agreed to by the reader, and uniformly enforced throughout the organization. Here again you can see policies are the tip of the pyramid, supported by standards, guidelines, and procedures. In order to produce a complete information security policy, management must define 3 types of information security policies. They must have an enterprise information security program, an issue-specific information security policy, and a system-specific policy. We'll develop an issue-specific information security policy through the duration of this course. But first we need to discuss all 3 types. Let's discuss the Enterprise Information Security Policy. An EISP is also known as a Security Program Policy, a General Security Policy, an IT Security Policy, a High-Level InfoSec Policy, or it can be called simply an InfoSec Policy. It's a high-level information security policy that sets the strategic direction, scope, and tone for the organization. The elements of the EISP help guide the development, implementation, and management requirements of the InfoSec program. These must be met by InfoSec management and other specific security functions. It would be prudent for an institution to have policies that govern access and ensure that access does not interfere or create a hostile work environment for other employees. An overview of the corporate philosophy on security, information on the structure of InfoSec organization and the individuals who fulfill those roles, fully articulated responsibilities for security that are shared by all members of the organization, and fully articulated responsibilities for security that are set to unique roles within the organization are all elements of the EISP. Where the EISP gave you a broader view, let's talk about issue-specific security policies. The ISSP should assure members of the organization that its purpose is not to establish a foundation for administrative enforcement or legal prosecution, but rather to provide a common understanding of the purpose for which an employee can or cannot use a resource. Every organization's ISSP should address specific technology-based systems. It should require frequent updates. It's a living document. and it should contain an issue statement on the organization's position on an issue. Issue-specific security policy topics could include electronic mail, malware, non-organizational issues on software, personal or home use of equipment, personal technology during work hours. Elements of the ISSP include the statement of purpose, authorized access and usage of equipment, prohibited usage of equipment, systems management, violations of policy, policy review and modification, and limitations of liability. The recommended approach is the modular policy, which provides a balance between issue orientation and policy management. Now let's talk about system-specific security policies. SSSPs may often function as standards or procedures to be used when configuring or maintaining systems. SSSPs apply to any technology that affects the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of information. Each type of equipment has its own type of policies. What about access control lists? In general, ACLs enable administrations to restrict access according to user, computer, time, duration, or even to a particular file. In general, ACLs regulate who, what, when, where, and how authorized users can access the system. Linux ACLs also regulate who, what, when, where, and how authorized users can access the system. Firewall configuration rules are instructional codes that guide the execution of the system when information is passing through it. Rule policies are more specific to operation of a system than an ACL, and may or may not deal with the users directly. Many security systems require specific configuration scripts telling the systems what actions to perform on each set of information they process. While the document can be somewhat confusing, combination system security policies are very practical and have the guidance from both perspectives of management and technical specifications in one single place. Guidelines for effective policy development and implementation. The guidelines for an effective policy is that they are developed using industry standards, distributed using all appropriate methods, readable by all employees, understood by all employees, and formally agreed to, as well as uniformly applied. The first part is an exercise in project management, while the later two require an adherence to good business practices. Distribution of classified policies requires additional levels of control in labeling of the document, in the dissemination of a new policy, and in the collection and destruction of older versions. This is all to ensure the confidentiality of the information contained within the policy documents themselves. Policies must be readable by all employees. In multinational organizations, they must also deal with the challenges of gauging reading levels and language translations for foreign citizens. Some companies will produce multiple policies, one written in each language that affects their organization. Quizzes and other forms of examination can be employed to assess quantitatively which employees understand the policy by earning a minimum score, and which employees require additional training and awareness efforts before the policy can be enforced. As you read this section on policy compliance, ask yourself, what if an employee refuses explicitly to agree to comply with policy? What actions would you take? As in law enforcement, policy enforcement must be able to withstand external scrutiny. Tools like Vigilant Policy Center keep policies confidential behind password-protected intranets and generate periodic reports indicating which employees have and have not read and acknowledged the policy. Policy development and implementation, like any other project, has a process, and one way to accomplish this goal is to use a System Development Life Cycle, or SDLC. A detailed outline of the scope of the policy development project is provided in the investigation phase. It provides sound estimates for the cost and scheduling of the project. In the analysis phase, it includes the new or recent risk assessment, as well as key reference materials. And once the committee approves the document, it goes to the approving manager for executive sign-off in the design phase. In the implementation phase, members of the organization must explicitly acknowledge they have received and read the policy. Remember compliance or policy compliance? End-user license agreements are a form of acceptance, as shown here. The maintenance phase. This is a living document. Remember that it requires a periodic review built in to ensure that it continues to be effective and updated. Again, automated tools can be used in policy management. Tools such as VPC also make it clear which manager was responsible for the policy, as his or her name is prominently displayed on the policy along with the date of approval. Other approaches to information security policy development include the SP 800 Tech 18 Rev 1 Guide for Developing Security Plans for Federal Information Systems, or the International Security Organization or ISO Standards 27000 series. Policy Administrator. Typically, this person is a mid-level staff member who is responsible for the creation, revision, distribution, and storage of the policy. The review schedule, again, this is a living document, should also be included and, at minimum, set annually. Once the policy has come up for review, all comments should be examined and management-approved changes should be implemented. Policy and revision date. Ideally, the policy document should include the date of origin, along with the dates, if any, of revisions. You may see this inside the policy on a page marked Revisions. A final note on policy. In reality, most employees inherently want to do the right thing. If properly educated on what's acceptable and what is not, they'll choose to follow the rules for acceptable behavior. Remember that, in summary, policy controls cost only the time and effort that the management team spends to create, approve, and communicate them, as well as the time that employees spend to integrate the policies into their daily activities. Remember that InfoSec policies must satisfy several criteria, not to conflict with the law, to stand up in court, and be properly supported. Also remember, for a policy to be effective, it must be properly written, distributed, readable, understood, agreed to, and uniformly applied. And last, remember that management must define 3 types of InfoSec policies: the Enterprise Information Security Policy, the Issue-Specific Information Security Policy, and the System-Specific Information Security Policy. Thank you for listening to this presentation. There is still one more for Chapter 5.